I do know we have people from a couple different time zones here. So, all right, well, maybe we'll get some people logging in as they get home from work and such. But all right, I think I'll kick this off. Welcome everyone. My name is Mike Bradley. I guess I'll call myself the host of this. Joined by a couple of my friends who help me out. Some I'd call board members, some I'd call friends, some I'd call both. To answer some of your questions as far as transition, industries, the reserves, graduate degrees. The people on the panel are people that have done some different things, and the first thing I'll do, I'll introduce myself. My name is Mike Bradley. Back in 2013, I got together with some submarine friends and decided to do a career fair as kind of a answer to the Naval Academy's career fair, but do it just for our community, the Nuke community. And did the first one of those in 2014. It went off very well. And then ever since, we've done a couple career fairs each year. In addition to that, I travel around and I try to stop in and hit every Navy base each year and just make myself available. I try to pull nukes in the area that I know that could come and have beers or coffee or lunch with you active duty folks and answer transition questions. We're not technically a 501c3, but I call us a not-for-profit because the goal of this is definitely not for profit. It's for to satisfy a need, and luckily there's lots of people willing to give back. So my background, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, not far from Penn State. Went to Naval Academy as an electrical engineering major. Did a boomer tour out of Kings Bay. Was MPA, DCA, QAO, docking officer. So a lot of mechanical engineering type divisions. Then I did a short tour in Washington, D.C., working at the National Reconnaissance Office, and did a little bit of space. And then after that, got out, moved back home to where my wife and I grew up. And I've done a little bit of everything. I've done some consulting. I've done some real estate, Airbnb mostly, and then I started up this thinking it was just be more of a side job, and it's really become kind of my full-time gig. So, but that's me, and let's kick it over to Mr. Alex. Why don't you introduce yourself, sir?
There you go. Thanks, Michael. Yep. So Alex Nestor here. I am on the East Coast time, so kiddo is asleep, so late night caller. I 2012 from Navy with a degree in English and Russian. Did the nuclear submarine pipeline. Was on the USS Georgia, the finest SSGN in the fleet. Like many of you, did a deployment. Did a 6-month maintenance period, turned into like 14 or 15 months, right? And then another deployment. And then I had the pleasure of getting red detail to be a shift eng up in New York, SHE prototype. Sure, I'll run into one of my students here. But honestly, I had a great time, great friends that I still stay in touch with to this day. Got out of the Navy January 2019, started with Amazon and their military pathways program that same month. And I honestly, I can't believe that's been 4 years now. So happy to talk about like the leadership development program. Happy to talk about the behemoth that is Amazon. In the 4 years at Amazon, I've worked in like 4 different jobs, 4 different business lines in there, and I'm a bar raiser and do a ton of interviewing. So happy to help however I can, answer any questions. Again, I'm not here as a recruiter or a hiring manager. But just as a fellow submarine officer trying to figure out what the heck to do when we grow up. So great to talk, great to answer any questions. And I think I'll pass it to Lauren, was on next.
Sounds good. Thanks, Alex. So yeah, Lauren Wilson, 09 Navy grad. I went Nukes. So my first tour was on a destroyer out of Pearl Harbor. Had an awesome time there, a couple deployments. everyone's always like, oh, how was Hawaii? I'm like, I didn't really see much of Hawaii. I was deployed for most of it, but had some pretty cool deployments, got to do some fun things. Then went to Nuke school and was on USS Abraham Lincoln out of Norfolk, and we did an RCOH. So brought them in for a deployment into RCOH, and that was a fun 2 years in RCOH. So RC Divo, and then I went did a short tour at ATG as a TLO. And while on my short tour, attended Mike's first career fair, and that was where it all began for me. And so I had just an incredible time really seeing and understanding what exactly somebody would hire somebody with our skill set for. What do companies that are looking for our talent, like what do they look like? Who are they? And I think that's where Michael's really kind of hit this awesome kind of resonant niche where you can kind of see that and kind of chew on that a little bit and think about, like Alex said, what you want to be when you grow up. So all that to say, I have decided I'm going to be in sales, and I'm still growing up, but went into biotech sales first as an individual sales rep. Did the shoes on the ground, knocking on doors type thing, where they that's the rough part, but the nice cushy part is they give you a car and a phone and all these fun toys to compensate you for the job. And then I went over to a little bit more of a software and tech sales role in enterprise sales, worked for a couple of different startups, and now I'm with a startup, or I should say a growth stage company called Spreedly, in the payments and fintech space. And I'm in enterprise sales, and I'm currently wrapping up my last week on maternity leave. I have a 12-week-old newborn and a 5-year-old daughter. And so going back to work, they were kind enough to promote me while I was out. So I'm going back as the director of sales, which will be awesome. But also I was expecting and kind of wanted to just kind of ease back into it. No such thing, but pretty excited for the next step. So happy to talk about transitions into sales and how that works. I'll pass it over to Seth.
Hey, thank you, Lauren. My name is Seth Kruger, 2005 Naval Academy grad, naval architecture, and then a little IJEP action at Naval Postgraduate School with mechanical engineering. My junior officer tour was on the USS Louisiana in Bangor, Washington. So the handful of your normal engineering division officer duties. Spent shore duty at the Pentagon as a flag aide, and also had the great opportunity for an individual augmentee assignment to Fifth Fleet in about 2011 timeframe. Following that, as a glutton for more punishment, I went on to be the engineer officer on the USS Chicago, fast attack out of Guam at the time. I had a really fantastic opportunity there, and really a very challenging but very rewarding experience that I think set me up very well for a transition to the civilian sector. Following department head tour, I was the submarine officer advanced course director. I was screened for XO at sea and qualified for command, but I met my beautiful wife Genevieve right before my engineer officer tour, and we decided that we like to hang out with one another. So that was my rationale for leaving the service. Following the Navy, I went to aerospace, where I ended up as a senior manager for a suborbital launch facility, and the team that I led was responsible for all the structural, mechanical, ground support equipment, ground avionics, instrumentation control, high pressure pneumatic systems, cryogenic propellant systems for a reusable rocket system. After about 4 years there, which was a really awesome opportunity, and I was a hiring manager there as well, so it can offer that perspective to the team. Went back into nuclear and working with a company that really has a goal of erasing energy poverty across the globe, and working on a sodium fast reactor project. So I spent some time working in nuclear, and then, in the pandemic space, thought, hey, let's go and maybe pivot to something else. And started to work for myself. Started my own consulting and contracting LLC out here in Washington, and do have a couple contracts where I offer my perspective and engineering operations background to kind of transition from R&D environments to more operations and maintenance minded type stuff. So happy to answer any questions about any of that background, and look forward to helping the folks here that are about to transition. And Daryl, I'll toss it over to you.
Thanks, Seth. Hey, everyone, I'm Daryl. I graduated from Tulane University in New Orleans in 2013, did nuclear power school and prototype, and then went out to Guam, served on the USS Oklahoma City from 2015 to 2018. So right next door to the world famous Chicago. And from there went to the Pentagon, was pitched as a watch floor job, but it ended up being a executive briefing job to the CNO and the SecNav. So spent a lot of time late at night getting briefs ready and then briefing them the next morning. So while I was in Washington, D.C., went to Michael's career fair here and talked to a guy who was an intellectual property lawyer. And after a while, he kind of said to me, hey, like, our program probably wouldn't be exactly right for you, but you sound like somebody who wants to go to law school. So why don't you just do that? So ended up now at the University of Michigan Law School, tacked on the MBA. So I'm a JD MBA graduating in 2024. Really focusing on the kind of emerging companies and venture capital space is what they call it in law school. But that's really, going to a law firm that is based out of Silicon Valley, services venture capital funds and technology startups. And I'll be heading to their Austin, Texas office this coming summer, and hopefully long-term, in addition to an agricultural technology growth company that I was a part of for about a year while I've been in school on their corporate counsel team. So happy to answer any questions about MBAs, post 9/11 GI Bill, how to use that, and what it's like to get into law school, how to go to law school, things you need to know. We do have one other submarine officer, at Michigan with me. So it's been a great experience. And last but not least, to Katie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Taylor. I graduated from the Naval Academy in 2012, and then I had the opportunity to go to Naval Postgraduate School, studied mechanical engineering, and then I had the fun of going on a submarine. I was also on the USS Louisiana in 2015, 2016. Unfortunately, or fortunately, my career in submarines didn't last too much longer, and I had to transition to the EDO community, but ultimately worked out because I realized that's not what I wanted to do with my life. So I got out of the Navy a couple years ago. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I really just wanted to create as much optionality as possible. So I decided to go to Harvard. I got my MBA, graduated in May. I decided that I really wanted to do software development. So I'm currently at Apple. I'm working at Apple Media Products as an engineering program manager. So for the Apple News, Fitness, all of the subscriptions that you buy, I basically make sure that those buys go through and Apple makes money. So not quite the same mission that I used to support in the Navy, but it pays the bills. Really happy about where I am. So I'm really happy to talk about MBA, transitioning into tech, and any other questions you may have. So thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Wow, it's a pretty impressive group there, Nukes logging in. So, what I always say for these things is these people are doing this because they want to give back, because people help them, but their time is super valuable. There's busy people and there's people staying up late. So thank you, panelists, for being here, and I appreciate it. And I mentioned in the chat that please use the Q&As. That's probably our best way of getting questions in here. Now there's some standard questions that come up all the time. So I'll while you guys think of your questions to put in the chat, I'll start and actually Quesley mentioned it here about the reserves. So I did not do active reserves. I don't think Alex did. Katie or Daryl, no. But Lauren, you're the lucky customer. Can you speak to your experience in the reserves and what was good about it, what was bad about it, and go from there?
Absolutely. So definitely not a reserve expert. Did 3 years in the active reserves drilling, and then kind of transitioned to the IRR because somebody called me and told me you don't want to totally rip the Band-Aid off. If you want to come back, I don't know. So I like chickened out, and somehow I'm on in the dugout or whatever, right? So but it was a great experience kind of for what I wanted and needed it for, because I just wasn't quite sure. I felt like the Navy has been and was such an important and integral part of my identity. And I felt like I wasn't quite ready to say goodbye yet. So it was a nice way to, get at the time, I don't even know, I'm not connected with them anymore, but it was at the time, a $10,000 like signing bonus or whatever. And I'm sure there's still some incentives in place. Maybe it's the same one, maybe it's different. But took that. It was a nice little extra chunk of change, and really actually was a great way to network with some of my local communities. So I moved to the Raleigh-Durham area after I got out. My husband, also Navy grad, Marine, decided to go to law school and wanted to go to end up going to Carolina Law. So we chose to come to this area and kind of reestablish, establish some roots here. So anyway, it was a great way to meet people from the area, because for the most part, where you're drilling is close to where you live, or at least that's kind of the idea. And it's fairly easy to find billets and drill where you live as an 03, as an 04. I know it gets a little bit more challenging, and there are less billets as you kind of advance and look for more command positions. But trying to see some of the specific questions here. I'm really not sure about time accumulating towards GI Bill, but I think it does. I would just I don't know. I wouldn't want to take my word for that, or probably anyone on this panel is an unofficial spokesperson. So I would, dig into that with the reserve recruiter. Should be able to address that question and make sure you get some really good guidance. I would make sure you do that kind of transfer as soon as possible, because I know that clock, you want that clock to start fairly quickly. But anyway, ultimately, I decided to get out of active drilling because at the time, there were just a lot of involuntary mobilizations, and I was super proactive about re-upping my TSSCI before I got off active duty, because I thought, I don't know what kind of job in the civilian world I want to do, but that's something that I'd like to be able to say, hey, you don't have to worry about me. I already have this. But it ended up being a pretty big bullseye on my back as I put on 04 in the reserves. So, just decided that wasn't something I wanted to do anymore. But I have friends that are in the reserves. I have a friend that's mobilized to Guam right now, and her family's home on the West Coast. So yeah, I can speak to some other, if anyone else has other questions about that, but great experience for the time that I wanted to do it for, I guess is what I'll say.
One thing I always like to add, first, thank you, Lauren. And one thing I always like to add is that reserve units, like reserve hubs, aren't necessarily Navy hubs, they're population hubs. So yes,
Yeah.
you'll probably have reserve units in Norfolk and San Diego, whatever, but there's a big Navy reserve unit in Dallas, which you wouldn't think of as a Navy city. There's a big reserve unit in Minneapolis. So so they've moved the unit close to where people can do their weekends and stuff like that. So I've had friends that have had very good careers in the reserves and have now retired. They got out at their 7 or whatever and then did that. So it's possible, but you're right. You probably will have to mobilize at some point. So
And I think you can, Mike, just add a couple quick things on the reserves. I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my dad did 20 years reserves and now draws the pension and the whole 9 yards because that's something that, and pays very little for healthcare, right? All those additional benefits that come from reserves that are really nice. I almost feel like it's selling it short a little bit to say fallbacks, but really nice benefits to consider, or at least to, if you're not sure, I would say, maybe just don't take the bonus and be out and obligate to extra time. But the reserves is much different than active duty, right? You're not just in, you can kind of be out anytime you want, unless you've signed for some sort of a contract or you took a certain set of orders. But I'd say the reserves is kind of a place where you can really have fun with it. And I joined a unit in Raleigh, to Mike's point, 15 minutes from my house, and some sort of annual training came up. You do, the 2 weeks a year thing, and I went to Romania for a couple weeks and stayed in an Airbnb and did a couple cool Navy things. And otherwise, my husband, who had just finished his 3L year and took the bar and was waiting on results, got to come with me. I mean, we paid for his ticket, but it was a pretty sweet little trip. We brought our then 9-month-old baby to Bulgaria and Romania. But anyway, so there's some really cool things that you can do in the reserves if you're looking for a little bit more of an adventure, or if you don't want the adventure to stop.
That's a good point. Yeah, a very good point. So, well, thank you, Lauren. One of the questions, which I will try to read, was about MBA versus EMBA. And luckily, our panelists, we have a couple EMBAs, or at least one current EMBA and one current MBA. Katie, I got her MBA. So can you three speak to your thoughts on, or maybe I guess some of the programs don't need an explanation. I mean, Katie can speak a little bit to HBS, which has been taking more and more nukes every year, which is awesome. And then Daryl, if you could speak to your joint program. And Alex, you still doing the Bloomington EMBA? No, you gave it up.
Yep.
Well,
I
maybe
talked about it and saw
yeah. You could talk about it. So, Katie, why don't you just talk about your MBA experience? And there might be people here, there's some very junior people here that might wonder why you would get an MBA, like what doors it opens and kind of how it works. So maybe you can speak to some of that as well, Katie, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an MBA, I mean, there's many reasons to do it, but primarily, if a lot of you are very junior in your careers, don't wait. It opens up a lot of doors. You get a really big network. And what a full-time MBA program gives you that like an EMBA or a part-time program don't, is you get time to think. And having time to think is so hard once you start working. So it was really nice. I had 2 years to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. You get an internship to test something out in the summer. You talk to all your classmates that have such incredible backgrounds, and it really opens up your eyes as to what the possibilities are. I wasn't sure about an MBA when I got out of the Navy for, all the reasons everyone talks about. Cost, I was really scared about paying a really big price tag. But surprisingly, there are a lot of programs that help you pay for it. GI Bill, Voc Rehab. I wouldn't let cost be a factor. I think people are intimidated to go to and apply to these schools. I would have never thought that I would end up at a place like Harvard Business School. And like Michael said, they admit more and more nukes every year. If you are here with a nuke background, it is definitely an option for you. So I wouldn't close the door if confidence is an issue. And I think finally, I touched on this before, but industries that I never thought about, I now think about, and I have a much broader understanding of what business is like. How does venture capital work? How does banking work? And I just would have never appreciated that. And I would not be at Apple and have the role that I have now if I didn't have an MBA on my resume. So I'm totally for it. It's not for everyone. If you know what you want to do and it's, kind of a more traditional career path, that other vets have done before you, and you know there's a pathway there, I say you don't need it. But if you're not sure what you want to do and you want to create that optionality, I recommend the full-time MBA program. So those are my thoughts.
That's awesome, Katie. Katie, did you take the GMAT or GRE?
I took the GRE. I
Okay,
did not have great GMAT scores, being totally transparent, and I wouldn't let that be a reason why you don't apply either. As a vet, they are more lenient, and I think GRE, at least at the time when I applied, they didn't report GRE scores out, so I thought that was kind of a window of opportunity, and in my case, it worked out.
awesome, awesome. Good deal. Daryl, can you talk about your program you're in now real quick?
Absolutely. So I want to start off with, I think, a really important point, and kind of building off of what Katie said about cost. There are a lot of these MBAs, you can end up at a private school, which if they don't have the yellow ribbon program, even if they do, sometimes they don't cover the full cost. So it will come out of, some of it might come out of pocket. You can go find other scholarships and other methods of funding. You know, Voc Rehab has been a really valuable program for a lot of people. Something that I did not realize when I was making a decision about which school I would attend was, if you go to a school like Michigan, that's a public school, but still a really good school, your tuition is waived. So there's no yellow ribbon program, no extra paperwork to fill out. You just go to school, your tuition's waived, and then that, you know, if it's 80%, then you're going to get 80% of whatever your monthly housing allowance would be. So that, you know, for me being, I think 29 when I got out of the Navy, just made a ton of sense. I didn't feel like the pay cut that I would take would be a big deal. And, you know, that I thought it would really increase my earning potential long-term. I would advise, I think there are, you know, people in here with a lot more service than me. And, you know, to that end, if you're department head or even like XOCO, LDO sort of range, probably the executive MBA would make more sense for you, partly because your peers are going to be a little bit older, maybe more well connected in the city that you want to live in, and that might be a reason to do that EMBA program. It doesn't mean you shouldn't go do a full-time MBA if that's something you're really interested in doing, because like Katie said, the opportunity to think is really, I think, important. You know, you want to explore new areas in venture capital, or, you know, in tech, or in even like food science or something like that. My program specifically, you know, Michigan runs a 4-year JD MBA program. There are other programs out there like Wharton, Kellogg, both do 3-year JD MBAs, so you can really pack it in. The JD MBA program at Michigan is very much like kind of a build your own experience sort of thing. So, you know, I did the 1L year, which is like core courses, and then MBA 1, which is core courses. Michigan Ross runs kind of a case method. Law school is always case method. You can't go to a law school and not get the case method. So
Daryl, can you speak to what the case method, like some of these people don't know what that means, and there was a question about that.
Yeah, so the case method is basically they're going to give you a case to read before you come to class. You've got to prepare. Any business school you go to in the country will be the Harvard Business School case method. You know, you won't get a different case if you go to Berkeley versus Harvard, because Harvard runs the curriculum for that. So you read this case, there will be important takeaways that the instructor wants you to get out of it. Depending on the school, you know, some professors will kind of let it be more of a free-flowing conversation, and you've got to kind of figure it out. I personally think it's pretty difficult to learn like financial accounting via the case method, but it is possible, and people do it, but that requires a lot more work on your end. And with law school, it's the same way. You know, you're going to read a case, there will be an important rule or a method of argumentation that the professor wants you to get out of it. And the way they'll do it is they'll just grab a student and do a cold call, which is a lot like an officer of the deck board. They run you until you don't know what's going on anymore. And it might kind of feel embarrassing, but you know, we're all nukes and we've all been embarrassed before. So you just kind of move on. And that really makes you a valuable member of the class too, because it's showing your, you know, especially in law school, 24-year-old law school counterparts, like, this is not the end of the world because I've done this before. hopefully that answered all the questions in that world and anything like that.
No, thank you, Daryl. Now, Alex, tell us why you're not an EMBA student anymore.
I think so. I think Katie and Daryl had a very good plan, and they executed that plan, and it's been very successful. When I was getting out of the Navy and the shift eng thing, I did not want to go to school. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I met Rachel Lessard, a former Nuke, who was Amazon's recruiter, and then I just interviewed and started and came into a leadership rotational program. Over the last few years, like my peers have been post MBAs. I do things like this. I've hustled internally and I've built a network. And then additionally, I've found really, really good mentors who have been giving me very clear advice on what my goals are. Does this make sense? And ultimately, I've got a good job. I've got a good network. I am hiring MBAs. So there's no reason for me to go get an MBA and either spend my time doing an executive MBA when instead I could do other networking events or other volunteering or other things like that. Or there's no reason for me to spend 2 years to do a full-time MBA. That ship or that path has passed me, right? So the big takeaway is have a plan, have a realistic plan, bounce that off a couple of mentors. When I was on this, probably this time last year after having my kid, and I heard the Chicago Booth MBA folks and the Wharton folks, I was like, yeah, maybe I should do that. Talked to a couple of my mentors and you're crazy. Why would you do that? just keep doing what you're doing. So yeah, it's there's so many different options out there. But being able to literally write down a plan and then get some good advice or some mentorship and some feedback on it is invaluable. So that is why I'm not getting an MBA, Michael.
Yeah, I know you were kicking around the EMBA from Indiana. So somebody had a question for me about my consulting, and here is my my one consulting gig I did. Because I've been doing this and have a network of nukes, old classmate reached out to me. Someone approached him about running a program at Carnegie Mellon for this startup. And he says, I don't have time for this. Would you be interested? And I'm like, well, I'll at least listen. So I went, it was this Carnegie Mellon startup that was doing cybersecurity for pumps in civilian nuclear power plants. So I guess you can hack the pumps of a nuclear power plant. I guess you can hack anything, right? So they were providing this software-based cybersecurity, but they don't know anything about nuclear power. I don't know how they got this. I think it was a DARPA contract, and their software weenies, and they had this very doubly Laplace transfer cybersecurity type stuff that would prevent it from being hacked, but they didn't know anything about the hardware. So they asked me to come in and help them with their demos and help them do realistic demos so they could take this back to DARPA and get their second seed money, their Series B funding. So I said, sure, yeah. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, but I said, yeah, because it was interesting to me. It was something I've never done before. So I reached out to Will, who is on our board here. A lot of us know, and he's Mr. Startup guy. And he was actually finishing up his one startup in Pittsburgh, so he was in the right location. And then I reached out to my friend Jeremy, who was working at a civilian nuclear power plant, and we put our heads together, and I ran the project, and I paid myself $75 an hour because I felt like I was the least important person. And then I paid I don't think I paid Will the most, but maybe I paid him $100 an hour to help me get stuff ready to present and then to present. And then my friend Jeremy, who was actually going into the power plant and getting me data, mass flow rates of pumps, load, like things that made the demo realistic. Like Jeremy was the one guy that could do it for us. So he went and I think the whole project from cradle to grave, I think I billed them like $8,000 or whatever. And I paid myself maybe like, I don't know, $600, and I paid Jeremy. It wasn't $8,000, more like $4,000. Anyways, I paid my friends more because they did more, and I paid them more per hour or whatever. But it was a really cool, like, small consulting project that there was a problem. I ran a team that solved the problem, and I got paid for it. I'm like, this is really awesome. But then that's when the power conference was kind of taken off, so I didn't have time to do it anymore. I'd like to seek out contracts like that. It's probably some of the stuff like that, Seth, that you might be doing now. So maybe I'll hand this off to you as far as there are many nukes that start up their own contracting business and do things like this and solve problems. That this one was really easy for me to get my arms around. There's bigger ones, but we've solved pretty big problems in our careers. So it's something that and you can get some autonomy. I don't think I'll ever have a formal boss ever again if I keep doing the things that I'm doing now. So that's kind of cool. And yeah. So Seth, do you mind speaking to some of the stuff that you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. Just a couple keys to success. When or if you eventually want to get into a kind of independent consulting, contracting type of role. Really, you want to leverage your not only past experience, both whether it's engineering, technical, operations, but you also need to leverage prior relationships that you've probably made throughout your professional career. So again, working, previously in aerospace and nuclear, and performing well in each of those environments, really lended a lot of credibility to, to me and what I could offer a potential client. And, really when starting, one of my former employers reached out to me and asked if I had some time for them. I was like, write me a statement of work and I'll see. And that's how it started. I had a couple of other things that I do. I have a general contractor's license, so I like to kind of tool around with that type of stuff. I'm a volunteer ski patroller, outdoor emergency care technician, and really enjoy doing that in the winter and spending a lot of time doing that. So I wanted some flexibility in my schedule, and was able to, one, like I said, leverage prior operational and technical experience, and the relationships that I had made. So right now I have 2 contracts in the nuclear space, and I'm anticipating 1 statement of work in the aerospace sector later this month. So I am getting to be at capacity. I might need to hire someone, but it's a good problem to have, and I really enjoy it. I like being. I found as an engineer, and I think most nukes here, you can be a mile wide and an inch deep, but really know how to get deep in a very specific area when the time calls for it. And I think that's something that a lot of folks in this room bring to the table, and you can demonstrate that in the consulting and contracting space as well. So yeah, I like doing that, and just having the opportunity to do a handful of other things that kind of interest me and come up. So yeah, it's been wonderful.
That's awesome, Seth. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So all right, I'm looking for other questions on there. Now, something I always speak to is some of the standard degree type questions. We all have the opportunity to get the Old Dominion Masters pretty inexpensively and cheaply. I have it. I know Lauren has it. Alex, do you have it? Alex has it too. And my 2 cents on this is that I was able to get mine while I was still on my boat. I was on the West Virginia, and Boomer, the other crew, takes the boat to sea, and I was done with. I think I had my fish when I started, but I wasn't done with P&EO, so I started it and I just banged it out while I was still in the boat. Just because I had a buddy and we did it together. It wasn't super cumbersome, so and it was so cheap, and I actually enjoyed it. I believe it hit a lot of things that I'm naturally interested, like efficiency and quality. I went on to take additional courses. I got my Lean Six Sigma green belt. I enjoyed that as well. And I actually went to a 1-day thing on the Toyota School of, what was it? It's like the Toyota method, basically, which is very similar to all the Lean Six Sigma stuff. And my wife thinks it's kind of like a curse because like how I arrange things in the house now based on Lean Six Sigma. But no, so like that was my so I can say I have a master's, and it didn't cost me a lot. And there's actually an engineering management master's program that's coming to the job fair tomorrow, and it's going to be online for Washington State. A former Navy nuke runs the program, and he's pretty proud of it. So definitely give him his due if you're at the job fair in person or logging on. So Lauren, can you say your reason you're glad you got the Old Dominion Masters?
Well, similar to you, Mike, I mean, I'll just add that I felt like it was kind of a check in the box. I did it in RCOH, when I probably would have rather been sleeping between odd hours and weird watches and stuff. But like you, Mike, I enjoyed it more or less, kind of just powered through, just felt like, hey, well, I have an opportunity to do this. Let me just knock this out. And I'll just say it did help me get more money in my first job. I was specifically told that. It was just about, my first job out of the Navy was for Thermo Fisher Scientific, a big, Fortune 200 biotech company. And they have, a lot of big businesses have specific bands for certain and salary ranges for certain levels of position and jobs. And so I was, and that was like just a check in the box requirement. So it allowed me to get some more higher salary in my first job, which was nice. So haven't really used it much, I guess, specifically in enterprise sales, but that's not really why I got it. Again, it just was a way to knock it out.
Awesome. We have a question here. I'm just going to say we're answering live. That it seems like a lot of opportunities have been launched by getting an MBA or having a background in engineering. If you didn't have experience in these, where do you start? Are there opportunities that aren't business engineering? I think, I mean, there's tons of opportunities out there right now. Like, you're going to hear it's a bad job market or the economy is like, but then if you talk to anybody that's a hiring manager, they'll tell you they can't find enough good quality people, the people that like work hard, show up on time, do a good job, whatever. There's nobody in my family or any of my Navy friends that feel like they have enough people they work with that are like the people on this call right now. I think that I don't think you're going to have trouble getting a job despite your background if you have a good work ethic. But then I always say, like, what are what are you interested in? Like, what would you be doing if you weren't paid to do it? Like, I'm obviously a people person. I would be doing something with other people if I wasn't doing this or some of the other things. I like connecting people. I think this really plays into my strengths is what I'm good at. I'm always trying to marry off my sons. Yeah, so I would say take a look at what you're interested in, what your hobbies are. And some hobbies don't necessarily lead to a career, but what skills do you have that would you could get passionate about? Because once you find something that you're either good at or passionate about, that could lead you down a pretty promising path. So anybody else have anything they want to add to that question?
Yeah, I can jump in real quick. This is specifically on whether or not you should get an MBA, and also if you need business or engineering experience, right? So start with, my degrees in cell and molecular biology. I don't use it. I've never used it. And I don't really think that, having engineering experience would help me get the jobs that I'm doing. In terms of business, I'd start with the thought that if you're, trying to get a job that's not like teaching or something like that, you're inevitably kind of doing business, in the sense that, you don't need to be able to like read an entire public company's balance sheet. That's not the important thing. Like, the important thing that comes out of your nuke and your submarine experience is managing people, being able to dig into details, understand when things might not make sense. And I don't know if my MBA classes have made me, really like get it, maybe a little bit more comfortable with doing those things. But I was doing some due diligence for a VC over the summer, and I think it was pretty clear to anyone that would have looked at that balance sheet that statement that was a nuke, that it didn't make sense. And that's, I think, really what your nuke experience gives you. And I think there's a couple of other questions in here that I can knock out with that. Have you all had any difficulty pushing your nuke experience? I would say absolutely not. Most civilians don't really understand what nuke experience is and what it means. So what you have to be able to do is translate how, your detail-oriented experience while being able to see the big picture is valuable for their business. And, showing how you like use the critique process to get your team to function better, and how to build a growth-oriented team. Those are all really, really valuable things. And you don't have to go and say, I know reactor controls really well. You have to be able to say, I ran a nuclear reactor underwater or at sea, and that's hard. So I'm the person who can show up and push when you need me to push. I'm the person who can, dig into the details when you need somebody to do that. Those types of things, I think, are all the most valuable parts of what the nuclear/submarine experience give you.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of chime in a little bit. Like, I do not have a background in systems engineering. I cannot write a SQL query. I'm working on it. I can't code, right? But I my title says engineer at Amazon, and I'm helping to build out a freight company. But what I can do is, like, this person over here is working on something, and this person over here is working on something completely different that counterposes this person's efforts. And I connect the two of them. I'm saying, this is stupid. You need to fix this and go in this direction. And then we go in that direction, and we have a very effective team. I can write a crisp email, and I can write a really effective 2-page paper that gets 10 key people on board with an initiative to roll out across the country to save the company like hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Like, it's not like you will never, I'm going to say this, Seth probably will do it, but like, you're never going to do a statics diagram or like diving in and like writing like the base code for something. A lot of it is just like being able to understand what people are talking about, what's important, and then getting the team to move towards that thing that is important, and then be able to speak to, hey, this is why we did this thing, this is why it was important, and this was the result of that important thing that we did.
Yeah, Alex, you're spot on. From what I've seen in my experience, there's, one thing you kind of mentioned there. I've heard it called integration engineering. I've heard it called, the classical systems engineering, right? It's there's a problem, and you have to be able to distill it down into sizable things that can be overcome. And I think, Nukes have a very, have some background in being able to take the big picture and breaking it down into smaller, more achievable, work activities to get things done. Other things like identifying risk and mitigating actions, how to say, boy, this is something that could happen. Here's the likelihood, here's the consequence, and here's how we can reduce the impact of that over time. And maybe even this is how much it will cost. And this is the opportunity that could be achieved by it. Those are good things. And then just overall basic blocking and tackling, right? You heard Mike say, just show up on time and do a good job. Well, I got to tell you, I've worked with some amazing, like intelligent folks that could write code all day long, tell me about, different types of rocket engines, or how the neutron spectrum is different in a fast reactor than a thermal reactor. And while that's all well and good, great, well and good. At the end of the day, the company that you're working for needs to deliver results in order to make money. And I think Nukes know how to deliver results. They know how to task, follow up, and all that kind of stuff. It's basic blocking and tackling that I think is another great quality that, whether you know it or not, you've experienced it through your career, and it will help pay dividends moving forward as you move on.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I get most of my like civilian feedback through my wife and my brother's companies, because I work with these geniuses that are on the panel here. So like, but just how many people in the civilian world that just pay attention in meetings, that take notes in meetings, that listen, that read emails like thoroughly, like just I mean, my wife will send an email out, and my wife could have been a nuke, she doesn't think so, but she could have. And she's like, I emailed her, she didn't even read the email. And I'm like, so like, there's so much of that, like, and you're going to go, basic blocking and tackling is a good way to say it. Seth,
Mike,
so,
could I just add
yes,
a couple
Lauren, go
quick
ahead.
things on that? So I think, I'm trying to, recall back to like the first career fair of yours that I went to, and just the mindset that I was in, and what helped me, present myself well, or prepare to do that. So I think just a couple things I wanted to highlight that a lot of people, you've heard some of these, words of wisdom and advice. I think one of the things I just wanted to say is, let's just start out with the fact that everyone on this call is qualified to do way more jobs than you think you are. So let's just assume that you are qualified. And then, a great thing to do is take a look at the job descriptions that interest you, look at the requirements, and then use those to build a case for yourself. Those are the traits that you want to demonstrate. And it's really critical to kind of prepare. People want to hear stories, right? What are you going to remember from an interview? Not just like, hey, I'm really good at stuff, and these kind of things. And I'm a good this and I'm a good that. Like, how? Why? Show me a time when. And just kind of it doesn't have to be a novel. It's frankly better if it's not, because people's attention span is not that long. So, thinking about, okay, what are the things that I'm really good at? How do I demonstrate that I have attention to detail? How do I demonstrate that I'm a hard worker? how do I demonstrate that I can learn things quickly, or whatever the things, the traits that you have identified are important, or that you've identified are important for that particular role. I have a couple succinct, interesting anecdotes and stories, and I think that's how you really nail just a one-on-one conversation, a phone screen, an interview, or just a sit down interview, or a formal panel interview even, because some of these roles that you're going to be applying for at larger companies have, series of interviews, and then you might end at a final and a formal panel or a formal brief, and nothing to be intimidated by, because as already has been pointed out, we've all stood up there on the whiteboard in front of some much scarier people writing out much more intimidating things, and been called out on various things. So just kind of have confidence in your training and what you guys have all been through, and think about how you can highlight stories about what you've done, so that you don't sell yourself short at all, but rather capitalize on the opportunity to highlight why somebody should spend the time talking to you, and why you are worth their time, because you are.
Thanks, Lauren. No, those are really good points. Question for says, for those people working for themselves, how did you figure out how to do that? Well, I'll speak to mine, and then maybe I'll kick it over to Seth. I was fortunate. I had a spouse that had a stable income that allowed me the flexibility to do something on my own, with the thought that it might not work out, and so that was one thing. And I also just kind of like, people say, like, why did you take that risk? I'm like, I didn't consider starting a small business much of a risk compared to what I think of a risk is. I'm very close to I was, all my grandparents passed away now, but I was really close to them, and just some of the risks that they had to do, World War II, my great grandfather, like people coming over from another country, like I consider that more of a risk, starting up a small business that I put, I think I had my first down payment for my first venue was like 15 grand or something like that. I don't consider that's a car payment, it's not a giant risk. So like, I think we're good at assessing risk, and you'd be surprised how many jobs that these companies are trying to fill like have risk attached to it, like risk manager, risk mitigation specialist, or whatever. So Nukes, you're very good at assessing risk or whatever. So and then I just kind of nuked it out as far as I needed to make more than I spent, and so coming up with a business. Now, I didn't think I could make a small town salary doing this when I started out. So I just wanted it to make a profit and make it worth my time. And so I kind of just baby stepped it. And I think that's the process for anything. I know a couple of the people in the panel have real estate that they're kind of investing in. And I have a house in an Airbnb house that I fixed up and then renting out. Sounds like Seth does some of that. Lauren, I know you have some rental properties. I don't know if anybody else, but so like that's also baby stepping and things like that. So I think when you're thinking about starting your own business, you have to do it in small increments, because if you try to do something really big starting out, then you might not succeed. But just like get a quick first down, and like, okay, all right, that worked. This didn't work. That was I spent way too much time on this part of it, which was a waste. And then just like anything, but you're doing it on your own instead of doing but I've been doing like little things on my own for a long time. So like I had a disc jockeying company in high school. I did some other things. So it's been baby steps to this point, but this was my first full time working on my own. So Seth, do you want to speak to how you started up doing your stuff?
Sure. Yeah. Very similar to you, Mike. I have a very supportive partner with Jen, who's a managing real estate broker with Windermere out here in Washington, and afforded me the opportunity to be able to step back and really evaluate what is it that I wanted to do with my career, kind of moving forward. Assess some of the bases for what I thought success looked like. 18-year-old Seth is a little bit different than 40-year-old Seth now. So really wanted to kind of think about, some principles still ring true, but, knowing what I know now, what would I do a little bit differently? So, that's kind of how it started. And then, I took a risk on myself, but I knew that I had some pedigree and some experience to go along with it. And at the end of the day, if it didn't work out in 6 months, 12 months, I could pivot and go be a W-2er again, and that's okay. But I really wanted to have this experience in this opportunity, so I took it. And there's a lot of kind of minutia in the background, business licenses and other types of licenses and insurance and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of fun, doing running your own books and all the taxes and all that kind of stuff. Again, mile wide, inch deep in a bunch of areas, but it's fun. So.
No, awesome. Thanks, Seth. Hey, while you're talking, somebody wants to know about TerraPower, and there was another question about what you think about the future of nuclear power or small reactors. You just keep talking.
Yeah, you got it. So, within the US, there's I think there's definitely a resurgence in nuclear, and you're seeing it at multiple levels. The government is investing heavily in nuclear through the ARDP, Advanced Reactor Development Program, that has it's a DOE program. Multiple companies are involved with it, TerraPower being one of them, with their Natrium project, as well as their molten chloride reactor experiment project. There are several other companies out there as well that have won awards under ARDP. So government involvement is huge. There's also significant private sector investment within the nuclear field, just because it's clean energy, and the types of reactors that are going to be built play very well with the solar and the wind. Natrium, for example, with TerraPower, has a thermal salt kind of storage system, which allows the megawatt output of the plant to be varied throughout the day to kind of compensate for when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. And that plays really well in a utilities overall, plan for how they want to consistently, get the trons on the grid, and honestly make money when they can, and reel back production when they're not able to make money. And it's not only the companies like TerraPower or GE Hitachi or the new scales that are involved in this nuclear renaissance. It's also the usual companies that provide the consulting and engineering services, to these folks. It's the entire supply chain. So like the Sargent and Lundy's and those types of companies. One of the other challenges within the nuclear industry, which I think is going to end up turning out to be a real success story for the US, is most of the advanced reactors that are being produced are going to operate on HALEU, which is high assay, low enriched uranium, so less than 19.5% uranium-235. The United States really doesn't have a production capability for that yet, and has relied on Russia in the past, or the downblending of uranium domestically, which isn't a long-term solution. With the current world events, the United States is, taking a look at, how to produce HALEU domestically. And GNF just announced publicly that, they're building a facility in the Carolinas to build HALEU, which I think is going to be, again, another supply chain, demand signal for good people. I think 500 jobs were announced in, I think it's Wilmington, North Carolina area to support GNF in that effort. So again, support from public and private sectors. There's a need for energy. The folks that are investing in it privately, really believe in nuclear and believe in clean energy and making a pivot. So I think there's a lot of great opportunity in the sector right now. Really do. And most companies can't hire fast enough to get quality people through the door.
Yeah, no, and TerraPower will be there tomorrow night. Seth's old boss, Sean Finley, will probably be there. So, he worked at Blue Origin prior to that. So, I will put a plug in to the Washington-based Nukes still on here. There's going to be a nice lineup of people in attendance. I've been texting the two board members of mine that are flying in. Eric Anderson, who's in private equity from Colorado, is coming out, and he can speak to you about like in investment banking, private equity, some of that type stuff. And Sarah Bowen, who's coming up from San Diego, she retired from the Navy as an nuke, or she was an nuke, then turned EDO, and then focused on space. And she'll be there tomorrow night. So, and the nukes coming from the companies, there's some really neat ones. Mike Stevens might come from Blue Origin. I don't know, Sean, if you know, or Seth, if you know him well. He's a pretty high, at least he was a pretty high in the Navy. Yeah. So is
Mike Stevens was PEO for Virginia class submarines. I think he's now the vice president of safety and mission assurance at Blue Origin. So I know Mike. I think Alex, you probably know Mike. If he's there, great opportunity to talk to someone.
Yeah, I mean, that's the cool thing about our community. Like, people will they just, it's no big deal to come help out their shipmates, where if something else, some normal college fare, they'd never come out for that. So, Alex, can you speak to Ivan's question about bridging the gap from active duty from the Navy to the first job?
Yep. Yeah, I think so. I really like this one. Everyone's transition is different. Everyone's transition is different. You will have your own transition from the military into whatever that thing is after the military. Mine, right? It went really, really well, and then it was really, really awful. And then I had a really good mentor, and it was really great, right? Like the most important thing I can say is it's going to be different. You're going to hit the wall at some point, and it's going to really suck. So find some good mentorship and like some really good contacts early on, whether that's like a peer who's starting the company at the same time, whether that's a peer or someone who's like a year ahead of you going into a similar industry, right? Just try to identify like those people who are like you, but a little bit different, who have gone before you in a similar thing. And just build those contacts early, because again, like, I have no idea what your transition is going to be like, but I know it's going to be, you're going to have times that are really great. You're going to have times that are going to be really crappy. And that's the case for everybody. So whatever you can do to leverage your network and just, kind of talk through it. The really cool thing is, like, as you can see by these veterans, like, we actively look out for one another and have a very strong network. And so, like, there is going to be people there just to, set aside 30 minutes, an hour on their calendar, talk to you, do whatever. So yeah, that's my perspective on transitioning veterans. You will have your very unique transition, and just be prepared for it.
One tip I always give people about transitioning is for many people on this call, while you were in the Navy was your paycheck. It was what you felt good about, or at least one of the things you felt good about. And then also it was your friend circle, probably, because like we're all awesome. So we all want to hang out with each other. And if you go into the civilian community thinking that your job will fulfill all three of those things, I think you're foolish. Because the fact that it's just a rare, I mean, sometimes it is, but our friend Corey, who's a board member, who's a doctor, he gets paid to be a doctor. He probably feels good about being a doctor. And he also has friends, doctor friends, that he hangs out with. So he might be an exception, but for most people, that's not going to be the case. I always use myself as an example. Like I pay myself a nonprofit salary for doing this. I had the Airbnb rentals per paycheck. My friends, I literally have a group of friends that I run with. It's like a running club. And then what do I feel good about? I do feel good about doing this. I feel good about being a dad. And I also do, I volunteer at my church and do prison ministry for my church. So I feel good about that. So but those are three separate buckets that the Navy used to be all three. So that's my one advice for you, Ivan. Like Alex gave you good stuff as far as like good days, bad days. And I just want to, be realistic that you might not necessarily be best friends with everybody you work with. You might work well with them, but they might not be, who you're inviting over for the barbecue. So.
Yeah, Mike, I'll just echo that one. It took me a while to figure that out. And I wish I would have known that, a little bit earlier on. But, just here recently, I mentioned the volunteer ski patrol, kind of stuff. And I met a whole new group of friends, from that experience and get to work with them, on the weekends and provide first responder medical care. That's extremely rewarding. And helping people when they need it the most. So, a different friend circle, a different type of really, rewarding work, outside of what I do, kind of 9 to 5 type of stuff. Work doesn't have to be everything. Think about how it's a piece of what makes the entire you and what interests you.
Awesome. Thanks, Seth. I'm gonna pull Katie back in. So Katie, we have two other board members that kind of have like sexy MBAs, Dan Faraday and who am I forgetting the other? Oh, Chris Whitley. So they're both in investment banking, so they went and got their MBA and they are doing investment banking. There's many nukes that go get their MBA and go do consulting. And then obviously that you did your MBA and are in the tech world now. Can you at least gloss over like when they kind of have to make that decision, or when does a person in business school have to make that decision that they want to go those tracks? Because I know your internship, sometimes you go get the Goldman Sachs internship to then go work at Goldman Sachs, or you go get the McKinsey internship to go work at McKinsey, which some of the people on this call might not know what I'm talking about. Goldman Sachs is investment banking, McKinsey is management consulting. So can you maybe speak to some of this, at least at a high level, just so that the nukes on the call can understand that?
Absolutely. So an MBA, you do it because you think you have 2 years to figure your life out, but then if you decide you want to go into specific career paths, such as investment banking or consulting, you realize that you have to make that decision pretty early on. So there's, I would say, consulting, investment banking, private equity, VC. These are all routes that I know people that were networking before they even started their MBAs. So I hate to tell you, the rat race just continues. It's you do this, but there's a prerequisite, and then there's this pathway to get here. But generally, the more niche you go, the more work it takes up front. So I would say like on the VC for venture capital or private equity, these are things that I know people that did pre-MBA internships to help set them up for success post-MBA. For banking or consulting, I'd say it's a really good idea before you even start your MBA to have an idea which career path you want to recruit for. The summer before I started my MBA, I probably talked to 15 former vets that were in MBA programs and trying to decide which one was for me, because recruiting starts the moment you set foot on campus in August, September. And so by November, if you want to do consulting or banking, you already have to sign up for interviews. There's all these networking that are prerequisites, and then you interview in January for your summer internship, which is required if you want a full-time opportunity. So I know that's a lot of details, but take away consulting or banking. If you want to do those, you need to decide pretty early on. If you want to do something else, you have a little bit more time. I thought about both. I determined they were not for me. I looked at what are work environments that I wanted to be a part of and what did I enjoy doing. And it was pretty clear to me that banking wasn't going to fit me, my personality. I thought for consulting, why would I wait 2 years doing a job to figure out what I want to do when I can use my MBA to figure that out? So that's why I ruled that one out. And then culturally tech fit the most. So that's why I decided that. Does that answer your question?
No, that's perfect. Yeah. I really think that if I went and got my MBA, I probably would do something more like you, and because investment bank or the startup entrepreneurial thing, and do a school that that was a little more into that, and that's another part of choosing your business school. Harvard's pretty good at everything, but there's certain schools that are a little more. Okay, if you go to this school, for Carnegie Mellon or MIT are very good startup type schools. Like you get into there, they have startup incubators. That's another startup almost has like its own language. But Nukes do very well in startup. Nukes do well in everything, but Nukes do well in startups. And like Lauren, I think is technically working at a startup right now, and startups are great because they have a little more of a small workforce. They have a little more the harder you work, the more rewarding. And then there's also equity, which you get part of. Lauren, do you have an equity stake in Spreedly, or you do? Okay, can you just speak to how that works, and is that negotiated when you get into a startup?
I think the first thing I probably learned is generally everything is negotiable, even if someone tells you that it's not. So just general rule of thumb. But typically the earlier stage you enter a startup, the more equity stake you may be offered in the company. And it can work a few different ways. I'm certainly not an expert at it, but having been a part of sort of 2 startups now, they'll offer you options to purchase equity or to purchase grants at a discount or at a set strike price or at a set price. And so kind of then once an event occurs, either like IPO or somebody buys out the company, then you kind of get a payout. So that happened for me this year from the previous startup I was a part of, which was nice, helped my family build an addition on our house, which we'll take. But I think a lot of people join the startup world, hoping for that $1 million payout, and it definitely can happen. To be clear, I didn't get $1 million, but other people at my company that were there longer than I was there 12 months. So it depends on, right? There's vesting schedules that typically is set and not negotiable. And you'll be able to read that in like a benefits package or something like that. But typically the earlier stage you are at, the more equity that they'll offer, because you are kind of taking a higher risk. And equity, it's not necessarily all it's cracked up to be, because a lot of times, right, there might not be a payout ever, or it might not be for 10 years. So, you know, definitely kind of think about what's best for you and your family. Typically, I would recommend advocating for a higher salary, right? Because that's a pay me now situation versus a pay me later, or maybe pay me never at all. So, you know, equity can be fun to play around with and interesting. It definitely is kind of fun to work at a company where you have, you know, a stake there. You know, I also worked for a large biotech company I told you about, and they offer discounts on their stock. So a lot of big companies will offer things like that as well. A little bit different than equity, but
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. And while you're talking there, Joe wants to know how you got into sales as from nuke to sales.
I'll try to keep this brief, and I apologize. I think my brain is starting to atrophy with my newborn. I get about
and you're on East Coast
4-ish
time.
hours of sleep. Yeah. I feel like I'm a little delirious right now, but sales, I honestly just thought I wanted a job that was going to be flexible, that I could, you know, work remotely if I wanted in a time where it wasn't necessarily something that was that commonplace. I wanted to kind of make my own hours. I guess, you know, I reached a point in my Navy career where I was really fed up with, and I'm sure many people on this call, if not all of us, have been in this position, but where you get rewarded for a job well done by taking on additional work from someone else that maybe not be doing as well. So it's like, and oh, by the way, we're going to pay you the same amount of money. So I was very interested in sales because it's sort of a fun, unique sector where the harder you work, typically the more you earn, and the more you know, you're kind of in charge of your own destiny there, right? It's a very much you eat what you kill sort of industry, and that was very appealing to me. So I have really enjoyed being, you know, what we would call in the civilian world an individual contributor, meaning I didn't have a team. I love leadership. I've been a part of lots of leadership programs in various companies. I think that's just a natural tendency that probably we all have, being in the positions we've been in. But there was a very refreshing change for me transitioning to the civilian world, where I was in charge of my own self and not responsible for anyone else's actions, but my own number. It's a lot of pressure, but it's also a lot of fun. And so I've done, you know, I've really loved it. And now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, you know, they roped me back in. I'm stepping into a leadership team. I'm gonna lead the sales team, which I think will be a fun and exciting new challenge. But yeah, got into sales because I wanted to be more in charge of my own destiny, and it's definitely paid off.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Alex, they want us to talk about Amazon Pathways, and Matt wants to know, can you expand on the Amazon Military Pathways program and how it works?
Apparently I'm still in. I'm kind of charting my own path here, but they keep, you know, looping me in to do things. So I guess it works out. But I'm going to do less Amazon specific. I think Courtney and other folks will be there tomorrow, and they'll talk your ear off, and they're spectacular. But in general, like leadership and rotational programs, they're not all alike. They're all going to be called incredibly similar things. There's probably like 5 different military pathways programs. The important things are to like understand the details. Like Amazon's is it's not like a hard fast time and rotational thing. It's more of like kind of like check some boxes and experiential. In general, I'll just tell, like, the reason that Amazon goes big on Mike's conference is nuclear officers coming into Amazon's program rotate and promote about 60 to 70% faster than top MBAs in the same program, in the same structure. And military veterans, they are about 15 to 20% ahead of that curve. So like, that's really cool. That is really neat, because I didn't have to sit somewhere for 2 years just to meet a requirement. You know, I checked enough boxes, I was doing enough things, and then I promoted at the year mark. which is crazy. Other ones will be like, hey, 6 months in this place, 6 months in this place, 6 months in this place. So getting those details is really important. The biggest reason why I did a leadership thing or a rotational program is ultimately two reasons. One, there was some structure there, like there was structure, so I could understand looking externally like how I was doing. Am I doing well? Am I doing better than I thought? Am I doing worse? Like it gave me a good outside measuring stick, just to understand like what do I need to focus on. And then the two thing is outside advocacy. Amazon is a large company. There's other big companies out there. I mean, I won't make any any means, like there is a reputation that Amazon is a meat grinder, and that totally is the case in some instances, right? I wanted to know that if I was going to be put in a really crappy site with terrible leadership, I would have a team of program managers in Seattle who their whole job was to make me successful. So that way, if just the stars align and I had to, like the command triad from hell, that I could, raise a flag and say, hey, look, this is not what you guys hired me for. Like how can we find an option, right? And having gone through it, like I still mentor people. Most of them totally fine, do great every year, running like one or two where it's like, yeah, that's a terrible environment. Let's get you the heck out of there as soon as we can. So those are the two really, really big tangible benefits I saw from these rotational things, right? And then, I guess the third, right, but it depends on the different companies and stuff like that. But it's a really neat internal network. Like I've got a chat room that's 24/7 blowing up with like 650 folks in the same pathways thing all around the world. And if I have a question, I'll literally just ask the hive mind and I'll get a response in like, a couple minutes. And that is invaluable. So hopefully that answers your question. If it doesn't, again, the Amazon folks and all the other, and like JP Morgan, they've got a solid rotational program also called Military Pathways. Those folks will be there tomorrow night, and they love talking. So all your questions should be answered.
Thanks, Alex. No, yeah. If you're applying for a company that has like a military leadership program or just a rotational leadership program, at least consider it. You're definitely qualified for it. They'll probably present it to you rather than you inquiring about it. But Chris Whitley, who's one of our board members, he did the Bank of America Merrill Lynch rotation leadership pipeline. Mary Coyne, she's currently doing the GE Wind leadership, or GE's leadership pipeline, which is a legacy one. So like there's lots, there's always a bunch in the JP Morgan one. So yeah, so it's a good to be with. Yeah, Alex, yeah.
One thing I forgot about, like, and if you are at all considering the Amazon, please hit me up on LinkedIn. I am happy to give you the unfettered truth. The details are important. Like I will turn people away from it if they want to work in one specific place. Like if they want to be a program manager in Seattle at Amazon, don't do the Military Pathways thing. Just go be a program manager in Seattle, right? If you don't quite know what you want to do and you want to get exposed to all these different teams and learn what's out there, great fit, right? So like get those details, but also think of like what is important to you, location, work-life balance, stuff like that, to make that best decision.
No, that's great. Quesley has a question as far as adjunct professor, like Sarah. How does one balance job and teaching? I think Sarah adjuncts a class. I'm not sure if it's a 3 credit, 4 credit, whatever, but she just she enjoys it. It's something different, kind of like Seth and his ski patrol and me with my fixer upper house, Airbnb and whatever. So I believe for adjuncting, you just need a master's. And universities love adjuncts because you're cheap. but it's also a way to get your foot in the door at a university. So if you move to an area that you would like to be attached to that university, you know, if Lauren wanted to do something with Duke or UNC, she could adjunct a class there in the engineering department or something like that. And then maybe, you know, do something further once you get your name in there. It's not a bad option for Nukes to consider, because we are all instructors at one point. You know, whether it's divisional training or whatever. So training is something you could do out in the real world. Like, you know, every company has training officers and whatever. So I don't think it's a bad idea. There used to be some Nukes that would get into academia to be like PhD professors. As colleges have kind of taken a hit post-COVID, I don't see that as much. But it doesn't mean it's still not worthwhile to do something educationally, even just to help out. One of my favorite Nukes of all time, Leslie Landu, she was on the Maine. She was like a Bowman Scholar at the Naval Academy, whatever. She's now a high school teacher in Jacksonville. So like, yeah, so it's yeah, education is an option for Nukes here. So I think we technically answered all of the questions that were asked, or at least, yeah, the written answers or answered them live. Panelists, do you have any last things you'd like to say so we can get Miss Lauren to bed and some of the East? I guess you're the only East Coaster. Alex is Central Time there, yeah. So the rest of us are on. Daryl, you're Michigan. What's that, Central?
Who does this? Michigan's on Eastern Time.
Really?
Yeah, you're coastal elitist, Michael.
Oh, jeez. I am. I guess I am. Yeah, Daryl. Sorry, you're up late too. So, so how about East Coasters first? Any last thoughts for the Nukes?
You know, you know, when you're transitioning out, you don't know what you don't know. Literally, just talk to everybody. Honestly, I had I think the Starbucks guy, you know, here like $5 years later, I still remember talking with the Starbucks guy at this conference, and like I thought that went from like nowhere on my radar to like, man, this could be top 5. It just sounded really neat. So just talk to everybody. You know, learn what you do. All folks will just want to give information, and just so you can find the right fit. So please, 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 just spend your time, talk to the folks there. They're all there to help you. And people want to give you the best advice to find the best fit. So that's my best advice.
Lauren.
What's that, Daryl? I missed it. I didn't hear you.
You can go next if you're ready.
Okay. I'll just quickly add, lean on your network. And if you don't have one yet, generate it, keep creating it and keep forming it, because I have yet to, you know, 3 different companies post Navy. I've yet to apply in the normal way for a job. I've always had someone tap me on the shoulder that was a veteran that knew me from way back when, or from whatever, and recommended me, or that was willing to you know, reach out and personally vouch for me, and then, you know, kind of go from there. And so I think that kind of alludes to the question that was asked earlier: how'd you get into sales? You know, people pulled me and advocated for me, and I think that's something that you can really do for yourself. So like Alex said, talk to the companies, but also talk to each other, and talk to kind of anyone and everyone, because you just never know who's going to be able to help you down the road, or who you're going to be able to help. And that's really kind of the power in being a Navy Nuke, and having this kind of a network to leverage.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I just remembered that I had poll questions, so I just am firing them out real quick. But everyone's answering them real quick. So so this, for those of you that ever see me advertising via email or LinkedIn, these meetups that we host or I host, and I try to pull a board member to her. And that's what we're doing right now. Like I like the same conversations that are had at a meetup, or what it has been, the questions back and forth there. So if you see me putting out an email that I'm going to be in San Diego, and one of your buddies, from Power School or from your undergrad is in San Diego, tell them to come out, because we have good get-togethers, and people leave there with information. Sometimes people leave there with, me taking their resume and giving it to somebody on this board, and be like, Lauren, do you know something in the research triangle? Alex, this person sounds like it might be a good fit for pathways, or, whatever. So like that kind of stuff. Or, how many times like, hey, I'd really like to talk to somebody about an MBA. Hey, Katie, do you have 15 minutes sometime to talk to Joe Smith here, who's a, JO in Guam, and like that kind of stuff happens. So like, so we don't know everybody. So if you help us, and then I remember, Alex came to one of my meetups. Now he's a board member, like Daryl. I remember, Daryl, you were in Guam, right? When I met you first, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, we had beers at Three Squares in Guam, and so like it's a small Navy, and so for those of your friends that couldn't log on tonight, that you think they'd like this back and forth, I'm recording it, so eventually I'll put it up on YouTube probably in the next week. So hit me up and I'll get you the link for that. So but lastly, panelists, thank you so much for your time. Seriously, it means the world to me that you're able to help out everybody here. And I consider most of you friends at this point, and I think that I couldn't help these nukes out without getting some help from you guys here and there, and I really appreciate it. So. But thank you. And then if you guys ever need anything from me, don't hesitate to ask. So. All right.
Thank you so
everybody
much for organizing.
Hey, thanks, Katie. Take care, everybody. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Thanks all.
Thank you.